How many of you have tried to get into a competitive specialty and met resistance? That is the story of Dr. Christian Matishak, who started out with the general surgery application, applied for 3 years before getting into residency, and ended up in anesthesiology. Anesthesiology is just as equally competitive. However, his journey is riveting, and I cannot wait for you to listen through and hear more about him. So he's attending anesthesiology at CHI St. Vincent in Little Rock, Arkansas. He completed residency in anesthesiology and pain management at UT Southwestern Medical Center, graduating in 2025. He earned a medical degree from St. George's University School of Medicine in the Caribbean, and he has a Bachelor's of Science with specialization in evolutionary biology from the University of Western Ontario. He's originally from Canada and is currently completing his J1 waiver. So, if you're looking for information about navigating residency as an IMG, finding J1 opportunities, applying into competitive specialties, how to score highly on the USMLE because he did score a 265 and a 250. This is the episode that you want to listen to. We talk about the resources he used. We talk about what works and what doesn't work and what to look out for when preparing your application for residency. So stay tuned, grab a friend, and send this to them as well. And let's get right into it. Welcome to another episode of the IMG Roadmap Podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Christian, and I don't want to butcher his last name. Can you tell us how to say your last name, Doc?
Yeah, it's Matishak,
Matishak.
kind of like Caddyshack. That's what I tell my patients.
Awesome. What's the origin of your name?
Ukrainian.
Ukrainian. Awesome. That's
Yeah,
pretty cool. And you are an anesthesiologist out of Arkansas right now,
currently yes, in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Little Rock, Arkansas. And you are a J1 physician, H1B. Where are we at with that?
Yeah, so I am Canadian originally, and then went to an IMG med school, and
Okay.
so now currently I was more in residency. I was a J1 resident, and now I'm on my J1 waiver, so sort of H1B.
Okay, awesome. That's pretty cool. So we want to hear all about your story, your background. I think it's super inspirational. When I got your email a couple of weeks ago, I thought, wow, this is the kind of person that I want to talk to, the kind of person that other IMGs need to hear from. Because one, you're in a competitive specialty. Two,
Mhm.
you are a J1 holder or working on your H1B right now. Three, you have that experience of going to a foreign medical school and coming into the US and going through the match more than once to get into a competitive specialty. So I just feel like there's so many high yield points that you'll have to just debunk with us today. And I'm so excited for this episode.
Yeah, happy to
So,
help.
yeah. All right. So let's get right into it. Can you tell the people a little bit about you, your background, where you're from?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, Christian Matishak. I'm originally from Vancouver, Canada, so the West Coast. I did my college up in Canada as well. Did like a biology major, trying to think of something that would be easy for me to get into med school with. Ended up not matching into any Canadian med schools, so took a gap year, and ended up finding St. George's University in Grenada for Caribbean med schools. Did that. Did my first year in England with their program, and then second year in the Caribbean. Then was able to go to Brooklyn for my last 2 years for my clinicals. After that, I matched as a preliminary general surgery resident at University of Texas Southwestern in Dallas, UT Southwestern. There, I completed 2 years of prelim general surgery before I switched into anesthesia, where I completed the remainder of my 3 years at UT Southwestern again. And then just this past June, July, graduated and have now started my new attending job here in Little Rock, Arkansas at CHI St. Vincent's, where I'm doing my J1 waiver. So 3 year contract to try to get that green card.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a pretty awesome story overview. And to many, it may seem like it just happened so easily, but we're talking years in the process and here years in the
Yeah.
making. So can you walk us through like how did you end up at St. George's from Canada?
Yeah, so actually, had a hard time after not matching into any of the med schools in Canada and looked into possible United States as well, but there's just so many options that it was pretty daunting. And then had a family friend actually talk with my family about how their daughter is just finishing up school at St. George's University in the Caribbean and talked about Caribbean med schools. And so we got to talking, looked through a couple of the different schools down there because obviously there's a lot of options these days. But settled on St. George's, just it had most experience kind of with IMG activity, especially coming into the United States for us. And we had a kind of a success story that we were talking with. So went through the motions with them. I was a year out of college, so had to do a couple other things. They have different tracks through that med school where if you haven't been in school for a little while, you can do kind of pre-med for a couple months, or you can take like an entrance exam, which is what I did. And so when they gave us that option that, hey, if you do well on this 6-week course, you can come straight into the med school, that was kind of like, okay, this seems like a good idea. Let's give that a shot.
And you did the track with this with St. George's where you went to the UK for 1 year. That's not a very
Yeah,
familiar option for many of the listeners.
no, yeah. So St. George's actually has a relationship with this university called Northumbria University. It's in Newcastle, England, so just below Scotland, up north, like 3 hours from London. And they actually have a whole like wing division kind of their university that's just for our international med students. So for us, for St. George's initially, like my starting class, I think was over 1,000 when I first started. But in England, they take about 100 or 150 of us. So I got to have smaller class sizes for that first year. And a little more like in-person kind of dialogue with everybody, but you're just not with all the other meds from all the other years, which is the downside of not going to the island right away. But I think even now they've opened it up. So instead of doing 1 year in England, 1 year in the Caribbean, you can actually do both your kind of like clinical or sciences years in England before trying to go to the US for your clinical rotation. So that was really cool.
That's awesome. And for listeners who are wondering, St. George's is actually one of the top Caribbean medical schools. And when it comes to picking Caribbean medical schools, I always recommend to people that reach out to me, there are only a few that you need to be bothered with. And St. George's is one of them. Ross University, obviously, is another
Yeah.
one. There's American University of the Caribbean. There are very few that have a track record of success. So if you're listening to this and you're starting out and you're thinking, I'm listening to it because I want to go to the Caribbean, remember, not all schools are made equal, and you should find a school that has a track record of success. And if you look at schools like SGU, what you notice is they have physicians in just about every specialty. And that's one way that I measure success for Caribbean medical school is, are you able to match people into plastics, into anesthesia, into surgery, into derm? Like, what is your record there? Because if you can match people into those specialties, you can easily match people into the primary care specialties, which are considered more available, thus less competitive. So
Mm-hmm.
just a little plug in there for my Caribbean med schools and or my Caribbean wannabes. And
Yep.
and for those who are already in Caribbean school, remember, because you have that large alumni network, you need to be reaching out to your alumni because they know the pain that you've been through. They know exactly where the shoe fits. And you're living in a digital age now more than they ever did. So if I'm listening to this and I want to be an anesthesiologist, I'll be really leaning into what Dr. Matishak is going to share with us so that I can be listening out for when he drops his email or his contact or his social media pages so I can follow him and ask him more questions because you'll be amazed how much mentorship you can gain or obtain from just connecting with people through social media and other platforms like that.
No,
So,
absolutely. I've had people throughout my medical training somehow find me on social media, see Matishak if anyone's curious. And I get DMs, every couple months about how to get into this residency or this medical school or just plans in general. And I'm 32. I'm still young enough where I'm cool with all that kind of stuff. So please, yeah, if
right.
you find me, shoot me a DM. If you have any questions, I'm happy to help.
Right, absolutely. Take advantage of that. I remember when I was 32, shoot. I was very much social. These days things are different. So
Yeah.
let's go into your USMLE studying and how you performed on the test because a lot of times they want to do anesthesia, they feel like it's a reach, right? They know that they have to reach a certain score threshold. So what was your performance on the USMLE, knowing that you went to Caribbean school, and how did we get there?
Yeah. So, USMLE, especially as the Caribbean med student, they kind of hammer that into you very early on. Like this is their main metric for them to get donations and them to get money is that their first pass rate is what they are really going for. And when I was there, that was when we still had scored step one. And they would even give us lectures in class that would show us, okay, depending on what specialty you're going into, this is what the average American medical student will get on their USMLE and match into this. These are the scores you're going to need as a Caribbean med student. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, usually it is about a 15-point discrepancy, it kind of seemed like for me. I think around the time I was applying, I applied to surgery initially, dual applied with anesthesia. But with surgery, they said, I think the average American step one score at that time was around 230 and IMGs around like 240 or something like that. So you needed to be a little bit better on your step scores than your American med students. And the entire schooling around those first 2 years was pretty dedicated to your step one because they want you to be able to pass that step one. They have a cutoff rule for you. If you are not averaging at least a 75% during your semester, they will not let you move on to the next term or next semester. because they don't think you're going to be able to pass step one. So they have those in play to make sure that the people that are going to be writing the exam have a very, very high chance of passing that first step. But passing it's not enough. You need to get scores as well. So for me, obviously I took the schooling aspect of it all, but I was a big question person, big UWorld guy, and then had heard about tutors as well because my time management skills are pretty poor. So there were different tutoring like courses online that you could pay for and find a tutor that way. Either someone that's recently written the steps and did really well on those, and they would show you your scores or their scores that they had previously gotten into. And so I did that as well. So I had I think a fourth year med student tutor me during my second year to get prepared for that step one score. And so I think I got a 250 on my step one. So I thought I would be pretty competitive for general surgery at that time. And then do you want me to talk about step two at all, or mainly step one for right now?
Let's go for step one and step two. Let's just talk about the USMLEs and cover that.
Yeah, beautiful. So like step one went well. That was dedicated study time was super important for that. So I think I did about 5 weeks of dedicated study time with a classmate of mine because I also like to be able to verbalize and kind of go over topics. So we would try to stay on about the same page of where we were going through first aid mainly for step one, and bounce like questions off each other after I had talked with my tutor and gone through our UWorld questions, etc. So I found really talking through topics with colleagues and other students was super helpful. Questions. I think I went through UWorld at least twice, possibly started on a third for step one, and then the tutor really helped. It was worth the money overall because she was very knowledgeable, had done this a bunch of times, so she had gone through with other med students how to do this stuff. So that was great. Step two is a different beast for sure because you do it in the middle of doing your clinicals during your third year or at the end of your third year. And so it was just trying to find time to study for that one. I wanted to score highly again because you want to get a little bit better than you want in your step one, and especially be competitive for something like surgery or even anesthesia. And so it was a lot more questions. Still had a tutor for that one as well. Reached back out to her and said, hey, do you have any kind of ways I can block these things out, which topics to kind of focus on heavily more. So I, leaned on her a lot. Shout out to her, Dr. Sarah Norco. She's a dermatologist because she got like a 270 something on her step. So she's doing what she's supposed to. And then with my step two, I believe I got like a 265. So got to go up a little bit on the second one, which I thought was going to be an easy way for me to get into general surgery. But it still didn't translate as much for my scores to getting the interviews and matches that I wanted.
That is absolutely mind-blowing that someone scores a 250 and a 265 and doesn't get what they want.
Yeah, I think I got 6 interviews total, and I applied to like 200 locations.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a little bit of a hit to the confidence there for a second. But looking back after going through residency and kind of meeting other med students or meeting other residents and talking through their kind of what their med school was like and all their processes, I see where I went wrong during my clinical years. That I maybe could have gotten more interviews if I would have done these other things.
Right. So I want to challenge you a little bit here. Let's just park here for a second. Because when I coach IMGs, I usually tell them you can convert with few interviews. And by converting, I mean you don't need, yes, if you have 10 interviews, which is the average, that's sort of the safety net for guaranteeing a match. Mm-hmm. However, I had 2 interviews, and I know other people who've had fewer interviews that are able to convert one program.
Yeah.
So when you troubleshoot now and you look at, you had good performance, actually great, exceptional performance on USMLE. You went to Caribbean Medical School. However, it's one of the better ranked Caribbean Medical Schools. What would you tell to that person who feels like they are set? Maybe they're confident in their scores right now, and they're thinking, I'm set, like I'm golden, it's gonna happen. But then you encounter 6 interviews and don't convert any. What do you think happened? What's the root cause analysis there?
Yeah, I think for me, there's a couple things, at least in my time throughout my med school, is like I was always in like a good mood. I always kept like my spirits up, trying to talk with my attendings, talk with other residents, get them to know my personality. Because what's one of the main things when you're trying to match that these programs want to see is, do they want to deal with you for 3 or 4 years? Do your personality match with the personality of the program? So I was trying to really show at least that part. And then I didn't kind of talk with, I think, enough with attendings about like my dedication to the actual surgery and all my interest in that. And I was more of a quiet person in the operating room. I I wanted to observe and learn, and didn't really want to raise my voice and speak up too much because afraid of sounding stupid, which I think then hurt me later on down the road, because then I'd be like, late into my surgery rotation, and they'd ask me to be pointing stuff out, and I'd have a question on what I thought that was when I was looking in the abdomen, but I never said anything because I just didn't want to sound like the stupid med student. But now having med students and having them come through work with me, please ask the residents at least like the dumb questions, because we'll get through there. So by the time the attending comes and talks with you, you're ready to answer that pretty well. So it's got a multifactorial things too. As an IMG, there's still going to be some people that just think like, hey, I don't need to take an IMG's interview, or I don't need to bring them for an interview, because we have so many American med students applying, that why do I need to look elsewhere? That's what I've heard other programs. I've talked to program directors when I'm not looking for a position or job. And Dave mentioned that to me before, where it's like, we already have enough in the pool. Why would we even look at somebody else? Or, sometimes it's just the luck of the draw that year that they had a couple other students that did just as well as you. They knew them a little bit better, and they'd rather take them. They'd rather take those scores. So it's kind of a 50-50 in my mind of how you perform, and then just luck is the other 50%, because every year people keep getting better scores on all these exams as well. So back when I did it, like a 250 was pretty good, and now I'm hearing some people applying to anesthesia and they get 260 on their exams, and like they're not getting interviews, and I'm like, how is this even a thing?
So, what would you say was your secret to performing well in USMLE for the listener?
I think straight up dedication time. You need to take out the extra noise that's going on, and you need to sit down and study, because it's still probably one of the smartest I've ever been in my life was the day of writing that exam, with the amount of knowledge base that they make you understand and know for that. And it just takes repetition and time, because there's going to be questions they're going to throw in there that are super random. They never used that question before, and barely anybody's going to get it right. But it's the ones that, like the main concepts that they're always going to be testing you on. That's where your numbers are going to kind of stay solid and change there. So repetition, go through the topics, go through your high yields, use that first aid book, use UWorld, use any resource that you like to use already, and continue that on. Because obviously we know step scores are very important.
And yeah, I like that. Those are the same resources that I use and recommend, and I'm happy to hear that that's what's working for other people who are actually performing really well too. So let's segue into, we talked about this before we started the podcast, but maybe I didn't clearly state. So you are currently practicing anesthesiology in Arkansas as an attending physician. However, you were initially interested in general surgery and was planning a career in surgery.
Yeah.
And what happened?
So matched as a preliminary resident for UT Southwestern General Surgery. Was super excited about that. They have a good history of taking IMGs for their surgery program because their intern class is so large. So I think it was 27, and 13 or 14 of us were preliminary residents. And so that was good. So went through the them, figured, now I'm at a American institution, UT Southwestern, pretty decent name. Now when I'm going through the match, this must, work even better than even having decent scores. Like now I have some general surgeons from UT Southwestern that are writing me letters. This should be a cakewalk. And then I think I got 3 interviews that time, and none to programs that I particularly wanted to go to. But I was desperate. And so I was like, oh, maybe I could do this. Maybe I can kind of figure that out. And match day rolls along. I get, soaked, don't match anywhere after my intern year. So I speak with my surgical program director and talk with him. And I was like, hey, I still like this program. I'm still interested. Like, is there any way I could come back and do a second year preliminary spot and try to work my way through things then? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. No problem. Like, we like working with you. Sorry that didn't work out. Come on back. And as a surgery resident, working through the ICUs, you do get to meet some anesthesiologists as well. Because they run a lot of the surgical ICUs or CVICUs. And we had one in particular, Dr. Christina Goff, who seemed to find the preliminary surgery residents and ask them if they've ever had a thought of joining anesthesia. And I remember she had told me that like my first 4 months into residency. So I reached out to her and I was like, hey, didn't match into surgery. Considering something that I gotta maybe switch programs, like what are your thoughts on maybe getting me into anesthesia? So she was super helpful in that. because once I got into my second year of surgery, I got notified by the ACGME or ECFMG, I think, stating that they would no longer let me go through the match for general surgery if I were to go through it again in my second year, because they wouldn't let me go from a preliminary two to a categorical one spot because they called that me regressing in training, and they only honor your J1 visa if you continue to progress. So they said the only options you have if you want to stay in surgery are to find spots outside of the match through like APD websites that show like, hey, they have an open 3 spot or open 2 spot in somewhere else. Like, do you want to interview for them? So that was my only option if I wanted to stay in surgery. And they said, or if you want to switch programs, like that should be fine as well. And I enjoyed anesthesia in general. I liked being in the operating room. I heard that, age-old adage that was told by one anesthesiologist that if your favorite room in the entire world is the operating room, you should be a surgeon. But if your favorite room in the hospital is the OR, then you should be an anesthesiologist. And I took that to heart because my favorite room is my bedroom, and where my bed is, where I can lay down and relax. So I thought about that, and I was like, oh, I still get to be in the operating room, still get to do procedures, still get to work with my hands. And I was interested in critical care at the time. So I was like, well, this would be a good offshoot. So luckily at UT Southwestern, there had been kind of a pattern of 1 to 2 surgery residents leaving and joining anesthesia there prior to me. So getting my way around the hospital and talking with different anesthesiologists was a little easier than I had imagined. And I started kind of putting myself into rooms where maybe an APD was, or the program director, just going in, introducing myself. Hey, Christian, enjoy anesthesia, would love to be part of your team or chat with you at any point, and really just schmooze for most of my second year of general surgery when I wasn't working, which was a lot as a second year surgery resident, but it was worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then actually for that one, like, you had talked about, I suicide matched for anesthesia. So, broadly applied again, didn't get too many interviews, but had a pretty good feeling about UT Southwestern staying there, just with the connections I had made. And so I only ranked UT Southwestern, which I don't know if I ever told my program director that. So if she hears this, I apologize. But hoping for the best, and luckily everything worked out.
Wow. So you said a few things that I've never heard before. I've never heard the word suicide match. And
Yeah.
what is that? What's a suicide match?
Where you rank one program, you hope for the best.
YOLO.
And yeah, exactly. Because at this point, I was a little down in the dumps, but still feeling like everything's going to work out, which it did. But I was like, okay, if I can't get into anesthesia at like the one place where I think I have the best chance of getting into anesthesia, then I got to really figure something out.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then the next thing you said that was news to me is, and it makes perfect sense, the idea of the ACGME, or, the powers that be regulating your progression in
Yeah.
residency and not allowing a PGY2 or a PGY2 preliminary to regress into a PGY1 categorical spot. I
Yeah,
mean,
that was news to me as well.
that's absolutely new to me. I do not know that. I did not know that it existed. And it almost makes you wonder, like, they are indeed watching, aren't they?
Yeah, no, 100%. I don't even know at what time. I think it was right after my second match, so in intern year.
Yeah.
And I'd gotten like a follow-up email talking about my next steps, and that's how I found even like the APD website, was because they sent it to me like, this is where you will find another surgery spot if that's what you're interested in. And so yeah, that was daunting, scary, but I'm really glad it happened. Worked out for the best.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a very special story. Never heard that one before. So let's go into, so you suicide matched into anesthesia. Tell us about your residency experience and how you got your J1 job right now.
Yeah, no problem. So residency experience, starting off with surgery. Surgery was tough. Hours were long, a lot of grunt work, especially as an intern. Second year, busier, less grunt work, but long hours, 80 hours in quotations, at least for most of that. Going into anesthesia was kind of a shock, because I didn't, usually for anesthesia residents, going from their intern year into their anesthesia year, so their CA 1, 2, and 3 years, they usually get about a 2 to 3 week gap at the end of June to kind of transition from in hospital like floor management to in OR management. And some people will call it gas camp, some people call it vapor camp. But it gives them a little intro before starting fully in the OR. So I didn't get that because I was currently on trauma surgery at the time. So I remember I did a call shift on June 29th into the 30th. So I was 7 a.m. to 7 a.m. Got off at 7 a.m., slept all day, woke up, ate briefly, and then went back to bed. And then the next day I was an anesthesiologist in the OR. So that was a little bit shocking there. I think I put the breathing tube in the esophagus for my first 3 cases.
Oh,
Luckily, everything
okay.
still went fine. Um, and then from then on, it was just kind of learning the flow of how anesthesia does things versus how I was used to doing things on the surgical side, which at least there was a little bit of crossover because I know where we're at least. But it was that the first month was a lot of like, okay, what should I have probably learned, in that month leading up to joining this that I haven't learned yet. And I had
Mm-hmm.
another co-resident who had just left emergency medicine and joined anesthesia as well. So we would meet up every day and talk about it. Just a brief side story. He was the one that first tried to push a gram of Vanc on a patient over about 30 seconds. And he got to watch in real time red man syndrome and collapse of your cardiopulmonary everything. So that was a good jump
Wow.
scare to learn pretty early on.
Yeah.
But I mean, going from general surgery to anesthesia was great for me personally.
Mm-hmm.
Hours were very long in general surgery. Anesthesia was a lot more kind of compact. Certain rotations tough. ICU rotations always a little bit longer. You have your 12-hour days, usually at least 6 days a week. So those hours were a little bit worse. But anesthesia in general, the hours were a lot nicer, which I was good with. And coming from surgery, I wasn't a big complainer because you don't get anywhere complaining. And so by the time I was in anesthesia, there's nothing to complain about from my
Right.
standpoint. So everything went pretty well that way. Residency, people have told me that there's thoughts that UT Southwestern has like some malignant component, and I didn't see any of that from the surgery or the anesthesia part of it all. I think they expect you to work hard because it's a busy institution, and we had some pretty crazy stuff. Uh, but everybody's there to help you still. All my attendings I worked with were super helpful. I could call them at any time, and they'd be there to help me out. They were very serious on my hours as well, so they even though I'd offer to work more, they'd be like, "Hey, we can't do that." I think going into like my second and third year of anesthesia at UT Southwestern was where you kind of get into the specialty stuff, and so that was a lot of fun for me. So a lot of neuro, a lot of cardiac, kind of chiefing, doing OB, epidurals, going around doing all that. It's a lot of stuff with your hands. It's a lot of working with your hands. And one thing I really noticed that was different between surgery and anesthesia was my morning. Usually, as a surgery resident, first hour of the day, you're getting numbers. You're sitting at a computer just staring. With an anesthesia, as soon as you get to the hospital, you're working like your fastest you can at that moment. So you got to get your room set up. You got to make sure all your meds are drawn. You got to make sure the vent is checked and everything's working appropriately there. Have all your airway equipment, IV equipment all set up. Go evaluate your patient, make sure that note's in, et cetera, et cetera. And so that it went from kind of being like, okay, I gotta kind of get my lazy butt out and start, looking up numbers to like, I'm straight up. I'm on. I have to be on right now, right away. So that was a little bit of a change where the energy drink in the morning really helped. And then in my second year is when I actually started looking for jobs because as an IMG, a little daunting finding out about this J1 waiver for anybody on a J1. And what the J1 waiver is, or for people that don't know anything about J visas, all these J1 visas come with like a stipulation where you then owe your home country a return of service after you complete your training in whatever country you're in the United States in this scenario. So for me, it can get my visa for my entire residency. Once I'm done there, I have to go back to Canada and they can technically send me anywhere they want for 2 years. Hopefully in the specialty that I trained in, anesthesia. I've heard some stories where people get put in as primary care after it. But they can send you anywhere in the country for 2 years. And then after that, you can apply to get a green card in America if you wanted to come back. The other option, instead of doing that, is to try to find a waiver position here in the United States. And what that means is you find an underserved community here in the United States that is eligible for a J1 waiver. The hospitals will know if they've had to do one of those before. And if the hospital is eligible, you work for that hospital for 3 years to go through your J1 eligibility and complete that waiver. And then once that waiver is completed, then you can apply for a green card while you're in the States. So I decided to do that route. I was in Texas, did like the heat, and then didn't necessarily want to go up to northern Canada for a couple of years and work there. So my wife, who I met in Dallas, is from the South, obviously, as well. So she actually helped me find this job here in Little Rock through this website called Practice Link. So that actually made looking for a job a lot easier for me afterwards because you could and when you're searching for jobs, anesthesia, medicine, psychiatry, surgery, etc., you can pick if there's any visa stipulations that you're looking for in a hospital. And so they have H-1B, J-1, both, or unsure, and you click that, and that's kind of the bulk of the places I looked at were through that website of, okay, do they accept a J1? Are they looking for J1 physicians right now? Great. Those are the places I'm going to talk to. And what I really liked as well, it had all the HR people, their emails on the website to show you who to reach out to talk with them about getting a job or anything like that. So I leaned heavily on Practice Link in my second year to get my interviews and ended up signing my job, I think, in May of my second to last year of residency. So for my entire last year of residency, I knew I had this job lined up.
I use Practice Link as well when I was searching for my J1 position, and I got an interview or two from on there, if I'm not mistaken. But just like you, I looked for jobs where I was located because I already knew the
Mm-hmm.
area. I personally didn't mind living in a warmer area, so I was in Kentucky at the time. So Practice Link is
Nice.
actually a really great resource for everyone listening. Just keep it in the back of your mind for when that time
Mm-hmm.
comes and you're looking for a job. And it's usually free to sign up, and they have webinars, they'll have open houses and kind of like open enrollment type deals where they'll come in for
Mm-hmm.
different specialties and showcase jobs. And as long as you tell people that you are a visa applicant, they will find something for you. Recruiters need to make money, and they make money once they get you a job.
Yeah.
So you can give your information to as many recruiters as possible. You don't need to pay them a dime. The hospital will pay them. Just get your information out in their hands and they'll find you something because they want to find you something so they can get a commission. That's how it works. So,
Yeah, it can be
yeah.
pretty daunting. I initially did that route too, where I get either someone would come by our residency and be like, "Hey, if you need a recruiter, like shoot us a text and we'll add you to a list." And I did that a couple times, and then I would just get you know a ton of text messages being like, "Hey, are you interested in this job?" And a lot of them would be generic, and so I then like look through the job and they'd say like not visa applicable, and I'd be like, "Oh, dang it!" So like I that's why I ended up using Practice Link afterwards because I was like, "Oh, I can just search."
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes perfect sense. So let's talk about where you're at now and what that looks like for you for getting your green card. I know before we started recording, you made a joke, and I'm very lighthearted with like racial jokes personally. It doesn't bother me. But we're talking about, the fact that being a young white male doesn't scream immigrant. And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
people laugh when you say you're an immigrant. So let's talk a little bit about that and what's your plan towards your green card?
Yeah. So one of the big things when I was looking for a job was just obviously the visa. But once I knew places with a visa, it was talking with them about their processes and like how they kind of go about it. Because some people will be like, "Oh yeah, I've applied to one before, but they've never actually had a J1 physician." So this
Mm,
hospital has done a couple of the waiver forms beforehand. And Little Rock is the capital of Arkansas. And with them, they said, we will drop off your paperwork at the Capitol ourselves as soon as it's open. So we'll get all that done. And then they kind of walked me through what the process will look like for me for getting my green card. So my contract starts at 3 years. And then after my 3 years, I get an additional kind of year automatic, which is supposed to be for my green card acquisition year. And so what it looks like for me is first year, I'm here working. At the end of this first year is when my hospital itself is going to start working on my green card paperwork to go through the job portal of getting a green card. So they actually start working on it for me at the end of this year. And then from then on, near like the end of my third year is when they're going to put through my application for me as well. And then at that point, I kind of have two avenues. If the work route seems like it's got a lot of delays or anything going on, depending on what's going on with the government, I can try my marriage route as well, which I would put in by myself. But my hospital, they told me during my interviews that they would help me work through all those processes, and they pay for my lawyer's fees and everything.
You mentioned the marriage route. I'm assuming your spouse is American then?
Yeah, so I met her in Dallas while I was a surgery resident initially, and then we got married. Let me see. I wrote my anesthesia board exams one Saturday in July. We got married the following Saturday, and we moved to Arkansas the following Saturday, and then I started my job 2 weeks. So
Oh,
really
wow.
packed in all my major life events in like a 6 week window.
Yeah, that's amazing. So at least you have more than one option to get towards your green card. And I think, once you're on the pathway as a physician, it's going to work out. Like, I don't care what's happening in the country. You've done your part, you sign contracts, you have agreements, you're doing the right thing, and
Hmm.
it should work out. Absolutely. So
No,
what
I said, yeah, like things will work out is kind of my mantra of things.
Yeah,
I agree.
absolutely. You just have to think that way. Like you can't
Yeah.
get bogged down by a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
noise and the politics. I used to always tell people I don't vote in America because I'm not a citizen. And so I don't bother myself with things that I have no control over.
Hmm.
I only bother myself with things that I can actually influence and control. And
Exactly.
for the longest part, it was just working and making money, and it was also working and taking care of patients, and it was
Yeah.
also figuring out my J1 visa. So I'm not going to be bothered by everything falling around, falling down around me
Yeah.
because I can't change it.
I still have to wake up the next day and I still have to
Right.
do my thing. So,
Right, absolutely. You
yeah.
still have a life to live. So we were just sharing about your job right now and how it's sort of a growth experience for you because even though
Yeah.
you haven't done your fellowship yet, maybe you do, maybe you don't want to pursue it, but you're realizing that in the real world you can get to be a multifaceted anesthesiologist. Like you don't have to be boxed into one thing. So let's talk a little bit about that because a lot of IMGs we get stuck in this mindset that there's only one way to get there. And maybe because we don't have fellowship, we are not as academic or as smart, or it's like we just feel like we need to be acquiring more to live a fulfilling life. So share with us
Mhm.
how you're enjoying your career now and what has been the most surprising part of how you practice that you didn't anticipate.
Yeah, so I initially thought about doing critical care with anesthesia because I did enjoy that a little bit, but I ended up doing I think like 7 or 8 months of critical care during my residency, and honestly, by the end of it, I was like, okay, this is enough. I'm good. I don't need to do this. And right now, the anesthesia job market's really good, so a lot of my colleagues and myself are like, if we're not in love with it, like we're not going to spend an extra year doing it. And I don't regret that so far for a minute. Going from resident to attending has been just terrifying, but also amazing at the same time. My amount of time off and my hours are significantly better than they were as a resident with anesthesia. It's nice. It's a lot of shift work. So I have a lot of spare time to be able to do things, get the house fixed up, all that kind of thing, which has been really nice. And one of the crazy things that I had with this job initially, which they said in their posting, was pretty cardiac heavy. And nowadays, in order to be a cardiac anesthesiologist, you need a fellowship. Like you won't be able to sit for the advanced echo boards anymore unless you have cardiac anesthesia fellowship. But here, I got this job here because it's underserved, and so not like there's not tons of people coming through here all the time offering their skills. And so I'm actually now doing cardiac anesthesia here as well as just regular general anesthesia. Just finished doing a four vessel heart cardiac bypass, mitral valve, and tricuspid valve repair, plus an impella placement. Which, if I told myself this 6 months ago, I'd be freaking.
Hmm.
But coming into work in more of like a private practice setting, you get to see what it's more like real world is
Hmm.
from where most of us are at some sort of academic institution where a residency is at. It's something that's like more specific for anesthesia is case length and like case outcomes. We'll do some surgeries like a gastric sleeve, which as in residency, that's a 2 to maybe 3 hour case.
Yeah.
Maybe senior residents in there, and it's a little faster. And these private practice guys, they're doing them in about an hour and a half at most, and that's like including me going off to sleep, including me waking the patient up, going downstairs in the cath lab, doing TAVRs, the aortic valve repairs or replacements. Those guys do those in like 45 minutes. They don't even ask for an A line. So it's been kind of like trying to iron out what I thought life was like as an anesthesiologist in a very academic institution versus how it really is. That's been kind of one of the big jumps for me. Also, just like resources in general. Where I was at UT Southwestern, we had a lot of abundance, I would say, there. So there's video laryngoscopes in every single room. You have multiple anesthesia techs that are always available to help you, whether it's your machine or other equipment's not working. Ultrasound is available for almost anybody. Now I come to this place where there's maybe like 2 to 3 working ultrasounds at a time. Um, I've yet to meet an anesthesia tech. I manage or I oversee CRNAs as well. They have to do all the turnover for the room themselves. So it's just been interesting to kind of like work with less and kind of go like hone my skills in other ways. Like I wasn't always that great at doing a blind arterial line, but now I've just gotten used to having to do that because an ultrasound is probably being used somewhere else. So kind of honing some more basic skills, which I didn't think I would. I thought I'd maybe try to get like more advanced, more fancy, but kind of going back to basics.
Yeah.
Some of the medications I used to use, they don't even have at some of the hospitals. So it's definitely different going from academic and then to private, but I do like it. It's been really great
Yeah.
so far.
Where do you see yourself ending up? Like, what would be, obviously we go for the J1 job because we love the career, we love the medicine, but most of the time we're also driven by we need that employment to get to the next step or stage in our career. And for me, there was a lot of like, when I get to the other side, here's what I really want to do.
Mhm.
What would you say that is?
Hon- Honestly, for me, I think I'm just ready for like kind of like that weight or the cloud to be off of me
Mm,
of
hmm
having that visa, having this kind of like gray area that I'm living
hmm
in,
hmm
where, right now I'm a citizen of Canada, but I can't be a resident of Canada because I could get double taxed. So I'm kind of in this like limbo where I have to relinquish everything I have in Canada, or else they could try to tax me on my money in the United States. It's kind of this questionable immigration period in America where like people look at me all the time, and I've definitely gotten an ice joke here or there at times, and I get where they're coming from, like out of just joking, but it can be a little like, okay,
It
I
gets
carry
sweet
my
a little bit when, especially at the
yeah,
end of the day, when you're
I,
talking.
I carry my papers with me everywhere just in
Yeah.
case. I've done it since I was a resident, not like I'm more worried about anything right now, but it's just having that weight. And I'm excited to finally get a more of a choice. I know this job, I did get a choice, but I had like a truncated choice of like where I can go next. It was like you can only really go to these hospitals. With residency in medical school, you're just like, hopefully one of these places will let me in, but I don't get to really choose. I'm excited to be able to choose where to go afterwards, have
hmm
that kind of with my wife. And there's a good chance we'll probably end up in Dallas
hmm
because that's where she's from, and we have a lot of connections there, and we do like the weather down there. But we're very open to kind of like checking out different places. She's lived in Texas, Arkansas, and Florida before, so she wouldn't mind trying somewhere else. And I've lived in quite a few places now, so I'm used to moving, and I'm always willing to do that as well. So I'm excited to have more of a choice and more
Yeah.
kind of onus on my own future after that. It's nice being in medicine because we do just kind of have this track. My wife
hmm
makes fun of me for it all the time. She's like, "You guys don't even know like how you make money once you graduate."
Yes.
She used to work in HR, and it is that joke where it's just like, yeah, you do 4 years of this, then do 3 to 7 years of this, and then you get a
hmm
job, and then things are fine. And
Yeah,
it's like
that's true. That's
you're
very
like,
true.
yeah, that's
We have
great.
we have a pretty good option here. Like we're
Yeah,
working with really good options. And it's very different for other types of immigrants that don't have that guaranteed pathway, don't
yeah,
have, you have a pretty good life as a physician in America. I don't care what anybody says. You have the opportunity to have a really good life.
yeah.
Way better than a lot of people. So we definitely have it made. And so sometimes it's important to just focus on that and not so much like all the other negative parts of things. And like we talked about before the call,
Yeah.
the time does pass and it goes by quickly. And you look back fondly at your years in Arkansas and they may really be cherished memories. You just never know.
No, absolutely. This has been a great place for me and my wife to like start our first year of marriage.
Yeah.
It's a great affordability. We're staying in a
Mm.
house compared to what we'd probably be in like an apartment in Dallas right now. Just renting. Didn't feel like buying, having a mortgage or anything right away. But paying way less than we were for an apartment in Dallas.
hmm
It's easy living. It's quiet. People complain about traffic here, but nothing's more than 15 minutes from anything. So it's a very easy lifestyle. I never would have thought I would live in Arkansas as a Canadian. My mom thought it was Arkansas until like last year. So, had never thought about Arkansas before, but glad I ended up here, and very thankful for my hospital for taking a chance on me. And then my wife for finding this job as well.
Yeah. And I feel like some people think a J1 job means you're going to be like in Podunk,
Yeah.
somewhere. But
No,
it's not the
there's like
case.
so many more options than I
Yeah.
expected.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I find like, you can live in a city and you can still have access to whatever you like the malls, the shopping, the airports, things
Hmm.
that make it, more urban than rural. Yes, there are positions out in the middle of nowhere, but there are also positions that are not in the middle of nowhere where you still have a vibrant life.
Yeah, and like once you kind of start looking into the waiver things, there's more than just like the initial J1 waiver. There's the Delta waivers for all the different states that cover the
ARC
Delta,
waivers,
the
yeah.
ARC waivers, exactly. And so there's a lot of different areas that, need physicians and will go to, extended degrees to try to get physicians there. So, it's all about where you look and being a little bit open, but, yeah, maybe you're not going to get a job in Los Angeles. There's a
Right.
chance I do have a buddy of mine who just got his J1 waiver in New York, which was very surprising.
Wow.
So that was
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah, that's
And so
impressive.
it is possible. He's doing geriatrics and palliative medicine, so he's like maybe a little special, and they're like, okay, fine,
Mhm.
we'll do it. But
Yeah.
no, it's possible. I have another one of my friends. He's in Florida right now as an internist with on doing his J1. His wife is in family doing her J1. So we're in 3 different states. We all did it. We all got it.
Yeah.
Not terribly difficultly. This summer was a little hedgy a little bit, but
Yeah.
everything worked out fine.
It does work out. So, what would you say are some takeaway points that you want that future anesthesiologist that's like you, for a medical school graduate, aspiring for something competitive, whether that's general surgery and or anesthesia, and they're listening to you right now and thinking, "Wow, he's so aspirational, but it feels so far away." What are some things that held you down? And let's talk to that person specifically.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that held me down. My father's a doctor as well, so that's who kind of got me into this whole medicine world. Which thank you for that. But kind of talking through with him about medicine because his journey was a little interesting, and he always told me, and he would tell his patients too, because he's a brain surgeon, so this made more sense for him. That your brain will tell your body like how it's going to go. Like you can force your brain can tell your body to get better or to feel better or anything like that. So he would always tell his patients like think positively and then the surgery will work out. Like if you think positively, your body will be in a better condition to do better after the surgery. And when I was going through the struggles of like no, now I'm actually into medical school or struggling in residency, not matching in that. He was like, "Hey, you got to be positive. Things are going to work out. If you think the other way, that's what you're going to start seeing. You're going to start seeing more failures if you're expecting yourself to fail."
Mm.
So I think it was around that time of the second, when I didn't match the second time, where I was just kind of like, you know what, screw it. I liked being a little Debbie Downer in my head. I liked being like, yeah, this isn't going to work out. Like, what am I doing? Blah blah blah. And I just told myself, this is going to work out. Keep working hard. Keep trying your best. Keep talking to people. Things are going to work
Mhm.
out. And as soon as I did that, things got a lot easier. I felt less nervous talking with people. I felt less nervous in my interviews. I felt more easygoing when it came to like going over questions and different topics and everything. So just the positivity, because the hospital is a depressing place. Let's be
Mhm.
honest. The only time people are excited to be at a hospital is maybe if they're giving birth, but also they're terrified at that time. Every time people don't want to be at a hospital, it's not a great place. Not a lot of awesome things happen. But
Mhm.
if you let that bog you down, like then you're always going to be down. You got to take the best out of every situation. Yeah, is this patient sick? Yes, but are you doing everything in your care to make sure they feel as good as they possibly can be? Then good. Then you're doing a good job and you're helping that person.
Mhm.
Did you screw up today? Did you miss an order? Did you put in this wrong, etc.? Okay, take that, wear that on your chest. That happened.
Mhm.
Tomorrow you just have to be a little bit better. No one's going to rag on you for one mistake you made way long ago. The only time people are going to rag on you is if you repeat these same problems over and over. Everybody
Yeah.
wants to see you succeed. No one wants to see you fail. It's just about being positive and working towards getting better that next day. And once I had that kind of in my head, things seemed to open up. It was
Mhm.
weird. It's super airy fairy kind of thing there. But honestly, I was like, wow, okay, this is going well. Oh, wow. Talking with that attending went really well. This case went really well. Wow. And so the power of positivity is real.
Wow. And I agree. I think there's so much about the brain neuroscience that as physicians actually are not given the opportunity to learn because
Mm-hmm.
obviously it's not a pathological state and people don't realize like we go to med school to learn about pathological states
Yeah,
primarily. We do learn about human body, but just so we can identify what's wrong with it.
exactly.
But when it comes to thinking, thinking is not often wrong. You have
Mm-hmm.
thoughts, they're neutral. But we don't realize how much the brain impacts our body, primarily
Mm-hmm.
through just that sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Like that's how it
Absolutely.
connects your central to your peripheral. But it's amazing what happens when you allow yourself to sort of activate your prefrontal cortex, which is that executive portion of our brain that allows us to be able to think through scenarios. That's what we use when we're seeing patients. That's what we use when you're in the OR and you're making critical decisions. And maybe simmer down that amygdala, that emotional, reactive part of the brain that just wants to like freak out or just
Yeah.
wants to give up. Or I just saw this on Instagram and that means I'm not going to match. Being able to shift back and forth and activating one part of the brain so that it's, it lights up more, the neuronal circuits are firing way more than the other part that's likely to just take us down and under.
Hmm.
I think that's a skill. And that's why, repetitive action, whether it's like things like meditation, yoga, there's a lot of science that those things work primarily because of this particular issue. You can rewire your brain to think through difficult scenarios and make growth opportunities come out of them as opposed to going down that rabbit hole of woe is me. And
Yeah.
no better person to hear that from than you, having gone through that step back of going to the match three bloody times is pretty
Yeah,
challenging.
that was a good hit to the bank account.
Yes, I mean, it's a hit to the bank account, a hit to the ego, a hit
Yeah.
to life in general, But here you are on the other side, thriving in a career that, God willing, over the next few years, you realize it was a better fit for you. You know,
Oh, exactly. Well, gosh, I even had my surgery attendings being like, "You're so lucky. I should have done that." So
yeah,
I was very pleasantly surprised with the popularity of anesthesia. And I mean, it's been booming lately. I know it's been very competitive. Before, it was a lot of people applying as like dual applying, like I did initially, and now people are just solo applying anesthesia, which is really
yeah.
impressive.
Yeah, I find that there's a pull to NSIR now, especially for the surgical types that are
Yeah.
realizing they want a different quality of life, but they still want that OR presence, they still want the procedural presence.
Yeah.
So you have options if you have a dream. I think many of us started med school thinking we all wanted to be surgeons. I think I had that thought at some point in life, but now I realize definitely would have been the worst thing I would have done for myself. I probably
Yeah. Right.
so, at the end of the day, grow and you pivot, and you learn as you go. And I think that mindset alone is probably why you're already successful, but I can only
Appreciate
see
that.
you go up from here. So people are gonna want to reach out to you,
Mhm.
IMGs, career students. How do we find you? Do you have a social media page that they do you on or email? What's your preference?
Yeah, I have public Instagram accounts. It's just C Matishak, Matishak. You can shoot me a DM on there. I'm also on LinkedIn, Christian Matishak. You can shoot me a message on there. And then if we want to go into more, I can send you guys my email if you have longer winded questions that you want. But just reach out to me on there because I'm on there uh, more often, at least. There's the big stereotype of anesthesia always playing Sudoku or anything like that. But I don't have a newspaper in there. I have my phone. So if you need to reach me, I'll be on there.
Awesome. I just actually looked you up on Instagram because I was like, I'll have to tag you on
Oh, perfect.
once I list it. So I found you at C Matishak. And I just noticed you were at UK and St. Clair. That's where I trained at both those places in Kentucky.
Yeah, did you? Oh God, it was in Moorhead.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
was
yeah,
my
yeah.
first. That was my first IMG interview.
Oh wow.
Like that
Wow.
was my first one to try to get the J1 waiver. So I actually like that
Oh.
was before I found Practice Link, and they reached out to me, and they were so lovely and so nice. And I went up on a weekend because it was the only time I could get off during residency to like go interview there.
Mm-hmm.
Stayed in Lexington, so drove like the hour into Moorhead after a little bit, and met with them on the weekend, and they were so nice. Smaller hospital, so I had like all the surgical staff and anesthesia staff like all meet up with me and kind of chat. And I really thought I was going to end up there, and then because at the time it was the only option that we had, and I was like, what, this will work. Like these are really great people. They seem to have a good figure of the whole visa situation. But then looked into more stuff, and Little Rock is just closer to Dallas too for
Yeah.
family wise stuff. So we ended here. But God, yeah, I was close. I was almost there.
Yes, yes, same. I did my J1 there and then went over when it was time to, they actually wanted me to stay to do the H1B and get the green card with them, but I just took a position somewhere else. But like, yeah, great. Small world. Look at that. The world
Yeah. No.
is just where it's all swirling around the same few hospitals.
What was that? What was that hospital called again?
St. Clair Regional Medical.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes, yes. Yeah. No, they were great. I mean, the gig was pretty good for anesthesia. They have a guy come in every weekend just to do weekend anesthesia. So you were a Monday to Friday, and you were
Yeah,
off every
that's
weekend.
pretty nice. That's pretty nice. Did you meet Dr. Perry, general
Yes.
surgery? Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was great. I did my son with him and still keep in contact with him till date.
Well, very cool. That's awesome.
Awesome. Well, nice chatting with you. We'll have all your
Yeah.
information in the show notes. Reach out, they always do. And thank you for letting me know that you exist so we could reach out and schedule this. That means a lot to me. Actually gave me the impetus recruiting and recording for this year's episode. So if you know other
Good.
IMGs that want to share their story, we're all ears. This
Yeah.
is going to help one person. I know it help one person. And I'm so grateful that there are people that think like I do.
Yeah, absolutely. IMGs, we got to stick together out there.
Right. So,
You got to do a little bit, but I will say, initially as an intern, everyone's like, what med school you go to? No one's asked me what med school I've gone to since I've gotten a job or been residency. And if they do, and I tell them my story, everyone's jealous.
yes.
Everyone thinks that the lifestyle of an IMG is so much better than the American med student.
The grass is always greener on the other side.
Yeah, they're like, I'll go to a year in England, a year in the Caribbean, 2 years in New York. They're like, God, that was so much
That
better
was
than,
awesome.
my
Yeah.
4 years in Houston. I'm like, that
Right.
also sounds pretty good though, guys. Like, don't
Right,
worry.
right,
But
right. I would have taken 4 years in Houston. It just didn't
yeah,
happen.
yeah, exactly. But don't let it get bogged down. There's a ton of us. I mean, St. George's has, I think, now the most practicing doctors in the United States out of any medical school.
Hmm.
We'd just be now Indiana. So we're everywhere.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for coming. Until next time.
Absolutely.